Character customization and avatar creation is an incredibly valuable tool for increasing engagement with your users, especially so if retention is your KPI or you're working with free spirit type of Hexad players. But building an entire system to allow full customization can be a daunting task. There's tons of balancing, there's tons of art creation, lots of different stuff goes into a full-on customization scheme. Prefab character selection allows you to get the pros of this kind of concept where someone can choose a character that they feel engaged with, that they feel like they're part of the world, without needing to build all the content that comes with a full-on exploratory avatar and character creation system. This allows you to get to something like an iteration 1, especially if you want to try this out. You can do this for relatively cheap comparatively and see and test and understand if this is something your users are interested in. And one of my favorite games for accomplishing this is Vampire Survivors, where you don't have a full-on character customization screen. You just have hundreds of prefab characters that you can choose from. This allows you to feel like you're part of the world without biting off an entire sort of character creation screen. And who knows, maybe down the road, Vampire Survivors allows you to create your own characters and choose some of these things, but we'll talk about that later. So let's dive into what prefab character selection looks like in the context of one of my favorite games, Vampire Survivors. As we mentioned earlier, prefab character selection allows you to drastically cut down the amount of work it might take to build out a full character generation tool. Not only for your own development team and cutting out what you need to build and design and create art for, but for the player as well. It allows the player a very low barrier to entry and still feel like they're part of the world, still feel like they had a choice or a say in who they are within this space. The balancing alone for a full character generation system is incredibly daunting. You've got to try to figure out every stat and what the players might do to min-max those things. And if you, by chance, have a disruptor player type, they're always going to find a way to make that OP build. They're always going to find a way to min-max those stats and create something that breaks that game. It doesn't matter how much you balance it. And prefabs allow you to really keep a handle on that. It really allows you to keep the potentials culled down so you can really control what your players are doing. Yet, they still will be able to find something that they like. And within this context, you can always add more later. You can add more characters, or you can add a build your own character down the road. If your players really buy into the system and you hear that feedback, that iterative process allows you to say, hey, outside of these prefabs, we're going to allow you to create your own. The Sims, for instance, allows you to play pre-made families. If you don't want to bite off create a sim, which can be a pretty daunting effort because you've got to choose traits and all these different things, you can choose a pre-made family, and then down the road, if you want, get to that later and say, okay, now I'm ready to go in and truly create my own Sims. At the very basic, you see a lot of times in old school gaming, choosing just 3 sort of character traits. Maybe you have strength, wisdom, and speed or something, but really just being able to choose those 3 traits, and you can go 3 different ways with it. You basically choose 3 stats to buff or debuff, where within each of these 3 stats, one of them gets lowered to 50% capacity, one gets set at 100%, and one gets bumped up to 150%. And just doing that gives you 3 archetypes where you can kind of start to build out, hey, you get to choose one of these 3 characters, and they're slightly different. They play different, they do different things. You've got to understand them a little bit differently. You see this a lot with these old school games I mentioned before, things like Battletoads, Golden Axe use this sort of 3 selection archetype where you can kind of choose one of these 3 characters, and those 3 stats just get swayed a little bit and not a lot of work. You really only have to play test and understand those 3 characters. Some common examples with this 3 stat model are what I like to refer to as RPG light, where you have attack, defense, and magic. is kind of your classic. And taking those 3 stats and doing that 50, 100, 150 scale allows you to kind of change and manipulate this and choose those characters or build a party. Chrono Trigger uses a sort of specialized version of this, where you have these 3 RPG stats, and each of the players that join your party have slightly different ones of these. You have magic users, you have melee users, you have these different things. You have defensive stats as well, that allow you to fill the differences between these characters without full customization. A full-on RPG would allow you to dump stats into all those different categories and really build out an entire character. But again, then you've got to play test that. You burden your player with that ability too. When they see all these different potential stats, that can be daunting for your players as well. Another common example you see is with a side-scrolling fighter game. You have melee, range, and health/defense stats, where you can kind of choose like, hey, am I a ranged person? Do I get bonuses in ranged attacks, or do I have melee attacks? And then I have my like health or defense stat to kind of say like, hey, I'm the tank of this group, where I have a lot more health than other things, but my ranged attack is really low. You see this in side-scrolling fighters a lot. Things like the X-Men arcade game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games have this a lot, where the 4 different turtles have these different variants of these 3 stats. In software, you see this sort of triad in the form of pricing strategies, where the pre-made or prefabbed pricing strategies are becoming more and more prominent, where maybe you have a basic, an expert, and an enterprise sort of version, where you're kind of mixing what are the features, what are the content, what amount do I get, like how much usage do I get, and you can kind of move these around, like what type of billing types do I have. What you want to do when you're doing this in your software, if you're building out this pricing strategy, this is why you see a lot of companies going to this 3-tier approach, instead of allowing someone to piecemeal their pricing and say, oh, I want this and I want this and I want that. Let me do half of this. That's really, if you start doing that, you're getting into the full RPG sort of context, and it can be daunting for your players. It can be too much for the customer to understand. A lot of times they don't know, as they're first starting, before they're paying for a product, they don't know what they're getting. If I say that I want this for $20 more, do I really know what I'm getting for that $20? Allowing them to choose one of the 3 tiers really culls that down quite a bit, and it allows them to kind of just say, hey, this is what I'm willing to spend. What do I get? And can I fit within that context? And you see this a ton in pricing. You see this sort of basic strategy in pricing all the time. When you get into the piecemeal, customers can start to feel tricked. You see this with airlines. Like, airline fares drive me crazy these days, where you get on and search for a flight and you see a price, but then I have to pay $20 for a checked bag. And if I want to choose my seat, that's another $5. And oh, if I want to be able to get on the plane early or get off the plane early, I pay for that too. And you're really starting to piecemeal, and that can be incredibly frustrating for users as well. Vampire Survivors really puts these, I mean, it has way more than the 3 traits. You have life, you have speed, you have magic ability, you have ranged ability. If you look at the list that each of these prefabs has, there's 20 to 30 different skills or numbers that sort of get put into this spreadsheet. And what that does is it allows them to have hundreds of characters, honestly. Like, it's way more than the 3 you would get in some of those old school games we talked about. And you can find tons of different ones, and it allows you to kind of mix and match and play with different characters. Sometimes you're like, hey, I want to try out these ranged characters, where I'm going to choose ranged attacks when I play this game, as opposed to the melee type attacks. And it can create a whole different playthrough. And that's what you get with these roguelike games, where each playthrough is completely different based on what you choose. And depending on which character, which prefab you choose, that might completely change your strategy as well. And one of the biggest things you get is what that starting item is. You get the one item to start, and each character, each prefab character, has a specific item that they start with. And that's probably the most important part of the game, is that one starting item. And choosing that effectively can set the entire tone for that playthrough, that run of the game. You also get a ton of starting bonuses. Maybe it's an area of effect size bonus. Maybe you get an extra revive. Maybe you get an extra weapon slot or passive skill slot. Lots of different things that you can do here. And what what Vampire Survivors does well is they have tons of characters out of the gate that you can choose from and you unlock, and the character selection process becomes a large part of this gameplay, in that you start with maybe 5 or 6 characters, and your first playthrough you unlock one, and then you unlock more, and it really leads them down the freemium type model where, hey, we'll give you the first 20 characters free, but if you want the Castlevania add-on pack, which I bought myself just as a fan of Castlevania, that's an extra $5. And that purchase was worth it for me because I love those characters. I wanted to play in that Castlevania world and take on Dracula within, I mean, it is Vampire Survivors, right? Like, there was something about the Castlevania pack that just made sense to me. But allowing you to sort of pay that premium, the fans are the ones paying the bills. Casuals can get in and try your game, unlock new characters, see what they like, but then the true fans are the ones paying for you to build more content. And looking at the product design space again, prefab layouts are incredibly common here. Just like Vampire Survivors has hundreds of characters to choose from, some workspaces within, especially the Adobe Creative Suite does this particularly well, where they have these prefab work layouts, or these workspaces as they call them. You can really break down these different workspaces just like you would prefab characters, where me as a user can kind of choose what's best for me. Just like in Vampire Survivors, I'm kind of apt to choose the area of effect attacks. I do the exact same thing in my Adobe suite. I choose the workspace that works best for me. Whatever work I'm doing at the time, I can choose a workspace that allows me to do what I want. And as a designer of these systems, we can add more and more workspaces as we go. As we interview customers, as we see what they're building, and we see how they're organizing their own custom layouts, we can say, hey, I didn't think about this, but we have this type of user that's laying out their tools in this way. Why don't we just build a new workspace to do that? So like we mentioned before, prefabs really allow you to take great customization, player customization, user customization, and put it in condensable chunks that you can control. And makes it so that you don't have to build a full-on system where you can piecemeal all these different settings or prices or features. It really allows you to keep control of what you're doing and limit that ability. The one thing to keep in mind is just make sure you're covering all your bases for all the different personas that utilize your software or play your game. Like, cover each of the Hexad player types, give them each a prefab character that they can choose from, so that everyone that's playing the Free Spirit has someone for them, the Achiever has someone for them, and same thing with your personas in product design. Make sure that your layouts, your workspaces, or your pricing strategy, however you're piecemealing this, make sure that each one of your personas has something that's kind of their go-to, where you say, hey, one of our users is a graphic designer. Okay, well, we're going to build a workspace specifically for that persona. And you want to make sure that you encompass all of the different personas you have. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you watching the video. Remember to like, subscribe, all of that kind of stuff. That allows me to make more content and talk about more design strategies and get more stuff to you, the viewers. So I really appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Thank you.